President, members of the Council of Nutrition Society, members of the family of Prof. C.C. De Silva, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. I consider this as an honor and privilege to be able to deliver the inaugural Professor C.C. De Silva Memorial Lecture 2017 of the Nutrition Society of Sri Lanka, and I thank the President and the Council for giving me the opportunity. I dedicate this lecture to Professor Chamodli Charms De Silva, who served this country as the first Professor of Pediatrics for 17 long years from 1949 to 1965. Chamodli Charms De Silva was born on 24th February 1904 in Nelladith, Bambalapitiya. His mother was the daughter of C.H. De Soisa, who was a philanthropist. Father, Dr. W.H. De Silva, was the first person from Ceylon to qualify as a Fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh in ophthalmology. However, unfortunately, his father passed away in 1908 when he was just 4 years of age. Afterwards, he lived in this house called the Alfred House. He started his education from Bishop's College Kindergarten and later moved to Government Training College, Colombo, and to St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia later. Although in 1922 he entered the Ceylon Medical College, he went to the UK and passed MRCS and LRCP and obtained his MRCP in 1931 and MD in 1938. He was appointed as Professor of Pediatrics in 1948 and assumed duties in 1949 after 1 year of orientation program. Nutrition, the community pediatrics were two areas close to his heart, and he was instrumental in establishing institutes like Nutrition Society of Sri Lanka and Nutrition Convalescent Home in Thalagolla, where this concept has now been absorbed by WHO as part of the management of acute severe malnutrition. Professor C.C. De Silva was a teacher, a clinician, and a researcher who spent more than half of his time in the laboratory, in which I had the privilege to continue my work as well. Although many who went to the UK to complete postgraduate training were not equipped to handle many nutrition disorders, and the guru of clinical nutrition at that time, as described Kwashiorkor in this country, was him. His contribution to scientific literature were immense, where he has published in many international journals, especially in the field of nutrition. He was a keen writer, and his contribution to non-scientific literature left a legacy of amusement in the reader. Although I was not privileged to meet or be taught by Professor C.C. De Silva, those who had the privilege of studying under him guided me. As Professor C.C. De Silva had a keen interest in community pediatrics and nutrition, I hope the work I present here will be a tribute to him, as it covers community pediatrics with relevance to nutrition. And my topic for this evening is Assessment of Nutrition Status in Sri Lankan Children, Validity of Anthropometric Cutoffs. Sri Lanka changed its economic status from a low-income country in the 1950s to 70s during Professor C.C. De Silva's era, with less than $250 gross domestic production rate in 1960 and risen to 500 GDP in 1995. And over the last 20 years, it has increased by almost 8-folds to closer to $4,000 by 2015. Parallel to it, the life expectancy has increased gradually from 55 years in 1950 to almost 75 years by 2015. The infant mortality, also in keeping with these socio-economic improvements, have improved from about 80 per thousand live births in 1950 to less than 10% per 1,000 births, 10 per 1,000 births by 2015. Main contributor for improvement in socioeconomic parameters is increase in female literacy rate from almost less than 50% to more than 90% by 2010. All these changes in the socioeconomic status had contributed to the improvement in the health and well-being of Sri Lankans. The population has increased steadily over the period of time with some reduction in population growth and has been less than 1% since 2014. One of the main factors that would be determined by the socioeconomic status and population growth is the nutritional status. And out of this, children are the ones who would get affected most. The nutritional assessments in 1950s had been focused primarily on undernutrition. Work done in the early stages by Prof. C.C. De Silva has shown that underweight had been 24.4% among school children, and this was at even a time when before Waterloo described categorization of undernutrition. Kwashiorkor rates had been relatively common, with higher rates seen between 12 to 60 months of age in a cohort of hospitalized patients, and Professor C.C. De Silva is one who described it in Sri Lanka. The nutritional status of the children under 5 years of age from 1975 onwards had reduced gradually from 55% of undernutrition to 24% and stunting from 50% to less than 20%. Wasting had been remained almost the same, around 13 to 14%. Since almost 2006, prevalence of all three nutritional status have almost plateaued, and wasting and stunting even before that period. Data from medical research institutes on 5 to 10-year-old children has shown that slight increase in wasting over last 13 years in the 5 to 15-year-old age group, with a reduction in stunting rates, and once again could be considered more or less has come to static. However, the obesity and overweight rates shown by the green and purple lines are increasing gradually. Data from the Family Health Bureau on nutritional status of grade 10 children, that is 15-year-old children, are given in this slide. Once again, the wasting in both boys and girls have declined over the last 10 years, with plateauing around last 4 to 5 years. The overweight rates have increased gradually, closer to 5% in the country in this age group. As we can see, we do not have national data from a single survey covering all age groups of 5 to 15 years, and there had been data from several small studies which show similar rates of stunting across all major cities of about 6.5%. While overweight and obesity is almost 10 to 15%, wasting is fairly high, reaching as high as 50%. Despite improvement in the health status of the country, the undernutrition indicators have become static. Why we have not been able to improve them further? Are we overdiagnosing stunting and underdiagnosing overweight and obesity? These are some of the questions that had been discussed at the scientific, managerial and policy formulating circles. Could we find an answer to this? The disease patterns of the world are changing with reduction in non-communicable diseases and exponential rise in communicable diseases. In the meantime, our disease patterns have changed as par with whole world. Closely in Sri Lanka, the communicable disease patterns are reducing, especially in the vaccine preventable diseases. This shows that how effective our prevention programs, especially working through the health system, being effective. However, a clear rise in non-communicable diseases is seen. WHO 2014 country profile shows that 75% of deaths are due to non-communicable diseases. An alarming statistic is that 1/5 of death due to NCD occurs during the productive stages of life, and that is between 30 to 70 years of age. But the untold story here is that the number suffering from NCD during the same productive stage of life is much more, which is a huge burden on the personal economy as well as the country's economy. Type 2 diabetes mellitus, one of the main morbidity factor in rising, and the prevalence is estimated to be around 8.5% for the country, with a majority between 30 to 60 years of age. Overweight and obesity are main risk factors. One main factor contributing to this rise in NCD is the rise in obesity, and it's high among females, thus placing the future generation at risk, as maternal obesity is a clear risk factor for childhood obesity. As you have seen that the productive ages of individuals are affected by NCDs, the Sustainable Development Goals identified prevention and control of NCD as a core priority. If that is the case, where should we begin? NCDs are conventionally described as adult diseases, and therefore many think prevention should begin during adulthood or at later stage during youth ages. However, you can see that how rapid weight gain in infancy would affect the development of obesity later in life, and childhood obesity increases the odds of making an adult obese. What is obesity? By WHO definition, it is presence of excess fat associated with adverse metabolic consequences, and the exact fat content associated with this had been studied and identified to be more than 25% in males and more than 32% in females. Fat content is directly related to the metabolic morbidity associated with obesity. For Sri Lankan children, we have identified this and published in the Indian Journal of Pediatrics. Receiver operator curves had been drawn to determine the fat mass associated with metabolic syndrome in 5 to 15-year-old Sri Lankan children, and has been identified as 28.6% in boys and 33.7% in girls. Different methods do exist for the assessment of body composition. However, they need expensive and sophisticated equipment and labor intensive, and there is a practical difficulty in measuring the fat content in epidemiological settings. Anthropometry would be best tool, but it should be an easily accessible, measurable and interpretable tool. BMI, waist circumference are some of the measures that are used to estimate or predict the body composition indirectly. Out of all available anthropometric measures and indices, BMI has been used as the surrogate marker to determine excess body fat. However, the validity of universal use of the cutoff values available in the world is questionable. In children, the BMI changes with age and sex. Therefore, for different ages based on the sex, cutoff values have been described. Different international standards have been used, such as IOTF, CDC USA, British 1990 and WHO 2007 are some of the commonly used reference values. The Sri Lankan CHDR also uses WHO 2007 standard. However, the use of a single BMI for adults across all ethnic groups has been questioned and been criticized for its poor detection ability. The universal use of BMI cutoff values has not been recommended and has shown to be different depending on the ethnicity. In 2004, a meeting in Singapore discussed this issue and considered that for Asian populations, much more lower cutoff values should be used instead of 25 and 30, to be as low as 23 and 25 as for overweight and 27 as for obesity. Not only in adults but also in children, the universal use of BMI cutoff values have not been recommended and has shown to be different depending on the ethnicity. These different cutoff values published in the literature have been validated for Sri Lankan children, and we have shown poor agreement with very poor sensitivity but high specificity. As a preliminary step, using body composition and regression models, a set of BMI cutoff values were developed to estimate the fat mass of 5 to 18-year-old Sri Lankan children based on a fat mass of more than 32 for girls and 25% for boys. These values were used as by that time we had not determined a fat mass cutoff value for Sri Lankan children. Different cutoff values curves are compared in this slide. The red line demonstrates the new cutoff values, and you could see the values are very low compared to other international cutoff values. Although data is not shown here, the Sri Lankan BMI cutoff value improved the sensitivity while having high specificity at the same time. What would be the effect of using a higher cutoff value described by the international working groups? It will lead to underdetection of obesity. Could this be the reason to have overdiagnosing wasting while underdiagnosing obesity? Some of the work done by Prof. C.C. De Silva showed that disparity between the USA group and sample from Sri Lanka in 1960 to 1961 from birth to 3.5 years of age. Weight for age charts were drawn for Sri Lankan children in comparison to centile lines of USA children. One could see that the third centile of USA children, the dotted line, is way above the 50th centile line of Sri Lankan children, the thick black line. Similar patterns were shown to the height chart as well as with the third centile of the US children staying at a higher level than the 50th centile of Sri Lankan children. This slide shows the mean percentage reduction of weight and height of Sri Lankan children from the 50th percentile of USA children during first 48 months of life. Both show same disparity at birth, which gradually reduces, and weight could be as low as 30% from the median by about 2.5 years of age, and height show a less profound drop of about to a minimum of 12% during a similar age. He attributed it purely as a nutritional deficiency, and genetic is a possible remote factor. However, all Sri Lankan centile charts had been lower than the corresponding US line. At that time, body composition analysis was in its infancy, and the emphasis was on nutrition. Furthermore, growth of an individual was thought to be almost unlimited, and overweight and obesity was almost unheard, and its comorbidities were unheard or were not attributed to it. However, this picture would give a satisfactory explanation to this issue of the role of genetics in determining body composition of an individual. Professor Yudkin on to your left in the picture with a European origin, and Professor Yajnik to the right in the picture with a South Asian origin have identical body mass indices. However, the percentage fat in Professor Yajnik is almost 2.5 times more than that of his European counterpart. This shows that the body fat content differ according to ethnicity. Therefore, different ethnic groups would have different body composition. Furthermore, research have shown that the body composition of individuals depend on the ethnic origin. At a given BMI value, compared to Europeans, Asian children have higher percentage fat mass, while Pacific Islanders have less fat mass. Furthermore, despite having same ethnic origin, living environment as well influence the body composition. In a meta-analysis by Paul Durenberg showed that white Caucasians living in Europe have more fat to a given BMI compared to their counterparts living in America. Thus, even same ethnic origin would have different body compositions depending on living conditions as well. Therefore, these data show that BMI based obesity cutoffs have to change based on different populations. A study I have conducted looking at the percentage fat mass of 3 groups is shown here, where the percentage fat mass drawn against the BMI C-score. The blue interrupted lines represent the children living in Sri Lanka. The red interrupted line is Sri Lankan children living in Australia, and yellow line represents the white Caucasians in Australia. For any given BMI Z-score value, the white Caucasians had the lowest percentage fat, while children in Sri Lanka had the highest percentage fat mass for any given BMI Z-score. The Sri Lankan children living in Australia had a lower percentage fat mass compared to those living in Sri Lanka, but a higher fat mass than white Caucasians, thus showing that not only ethnicity but also living environment contributed to the determination of their body composition. BMI represents the body mass adjusted to height. Although it is used to identify excess fat in the body, it does not differentiate between fat mass and fat-free mass. 3 different persons could have same BMI but a quite different body composition. Therefore, it is quite clear that use of some cutoff values to reflect the fat mass in different ethnic origins would be different. This has made many to argue how best to use BMI cutoff values, whether they should be ethnic specific or population specific. Furthermore, anthropometric cutoff values should depend on a biological endpoint causing disease rather than a population distribution of a parameter. Therefore, body composition is a complex issue and many factors influence it. Ethnicity as well as living environment influence the body composition. Current BMI based cutoff values are not sensitive to detect high body fat content of Sri Lankan children. Caution should be exerted when using non-validated growth references and body composition assessment techniques. Anthropometric cutoff should be developed to detect disease risks. Growth monitoring in Sri Lankan children. Do currently used anthropometric tools reflect the true growth of the children, and would it pick up the early deflections? It is not only the under but also the excess must be detected. Within the so-called normal range, each SD interval should have a favorable body composition in a population drawn curves. This paper tries to show how the currently used cutoff values would represent the body composition parameters. Conventionally, we use -2 to +2 as the normal range. However, it shows that the body composition of these children between -2 to -1 SD differ from those between +1 to +2 SD. But if we move this range to -3 to +1 SD, then the body composition within the range is more or less similar, but still there are differences. Furthermore, should this range be more narrower, such as spanning between -3 to median, and then would it have a more similar body composition distribution? Furthermore, in a parameter, that is BMI, that does not show a normal distribution, it is not always necessary to take minus 2 SD to plus 2 SD as the normal. As the parameter is skewed, the normal range could be narrower. Can we have a more favorable range which would represent health? මම ඒක ආපහු කියනවා. Growth monitoring in Sri Lankan children do currently use anthropometric tools reflect the true growth, and would it pick up the early deflection? It is not only the under but also the excess must be detected. Within the so-called normal range, each standard deviation interval should have a favorable body composition. In population drawn curves, this paper tries to show how the currently used cutoff values would represent the body composition parameter. Conventionally, we use minus 2 to plus 2 as the normal range. However, it shows that the body composition in those of between minus 2 to minus 1 SD differ from those between plus 1 to plus 2 SD, but they are still within the normal range. But if we move this range to minus 3 to plus 1 SD, then the body composition within the range is more or less similar, but still there are differences. Furthermore, should this range be narrower, such as spanning between minus 3 to median, and then would it have a more similar body composition distribution? Furthermore, in the parameter, that is by body mass index, that does not show a normal distribution. It is not always necessary to take minus 2 SD to plus 2 SD as the normal. As the parameter is skewed, the normal range could be narrower. Can we have a more favorable range which would represent health? This table shows that at each standard deviation range, how many children have percentage fat mass above the accepted range, that is more than 28.6 in boys and more than 33.7% in girls. Within the normal range, that is between minus 2 to plus 2 range, towards higher standard deviation values, you could see more and more children have adversely high amounts of fat in the body, showing that most of the gain in weight is by having high amounts of fat. In other words, more than 2/3 of children in my plus 1 to plus 2 SD range are obese, and in older age groups it is even higher. So, do international standards represent a healthy body composition leading to health is questionable. Does it matter for not having correct anthropometric cutoffs? Why we have to have robust anthropometric cutoffs? Professor Barker highlighted how fetal growth contributed to the origins of early growth. Professor Barker highlighted how fetal growth contributes to origin of diseases. Furthermore, Alan Lucas and Atul Segal showed how patterns of early growth would affect development in life. Therefore, it is clear that patterns of early growth was shown to reflect future health of an individual. How we identify the best pattern of early growth is the question. Once again, for public health programs, the best is anthropometry, thus enabling early interventions, which is most important. The question is that early is how early. We know today that metabolic programming begins in early life and the risk accumulates. Therefore, any metabolic deviation should be identified at the early stage of growth. the main factor that is associated with metabolic abnormalities is obesity, and we have to detect it as early as possible. Otherwise, it would affect long-term health. All achievements we have made in health arena, especially increase in life expectancy, would be at danger. Professor Paul Simmet, a former International Diabetic Federation president, stated that the generation lies ahead us where the offsprings could be more ill than their parents and even could die earlier than their parents. Therefore, early detection of abnormal growth patterns or obesity is important to prevent metabolic syndrome. This slide shows how early obesity affects later life. 8 years of age, 10.5% of children were overweight. Already at the age of 1 year, these children had a significantly higher mean standard deviation score for the BMI than their normal weight 80-year-old counterparts. In each 1 year increase interval, the change in BMI-C score was significantly associated with overweight at 8 years, with odds ratio increasing from 1.1 per 1 SD at increase at 0 to 1 year to 2.5 to 7.8 years. Children who were overweight, obese at 2 to 4 years of age has increased odds of being overweight, obese at 5 to 7 years compared to thin normal weight children with an odd ratio of 11.6. Similar, children who were overweight or obese at 5 to 7 years of age had increased odds of being overweight or obese at 15 to 17 years of age compared to thin normal weight individuals, where the odds ratio is about 11.1. The importance of early intervention is that majority of obese children end up as obese adults, and it is quite difficult to reverse it once they have become obese, and then they continue to become obese afterwards compared to a lean individual. In 2016, WHO put out its report on ending childhood obesity, where weight management is one of the key 6 areas in the control program. However, if there are no robust cutoff values, there could be underdetection of the condition. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, you may appreciate now that early nutrition has an impact on the development of obesity and related morbidity later in life. However, we have to ask the question whether we are feeding and monitoring the growth of our children correctly. A study was carried out in Nigam Education Zone to screen 5 to 15-year-old school children to identify the pattern of anthropometric parameters and body composition. Screening of more than 13,000 children was done from 8 schools. Basic measurements were done. Body composition was assessed using bioelectrical impedance. 13,266 children were screened. The distribution of the sample is shown according to age, category and gender. Assessment of the children is shown here. The mean height and BMI SDS scores were slightly below the median. The percentage fat mass increased with the age of the children. Waist to height ratio, which is considered as a simple tool, was more or less similar in both age groups. This shows the distribution of the nutritional status of the study population. Wasting was higher in the younger age group and in the male gender. Overweight and obesity was between 10 to 13% in the younger age group, while in the older age group it was less, which was varying between 17 to 18%. So the double burden of disease pattern is seen in this population. This slide shows how birth weight affects the later nutritional status of female children. About 24% of macrosomic babies end up as overweight or obese, the last two green columns, whereas about 1/5 of low birth weight babies are wasted. Boys showed a similar distribution to girls, but the quarter of low birth weight boys are wasted. Therefore, this shows that those who were born small and remain small, it is pathological or they are still normal is the question. What would be the repercussions of feeding them with and bringing them to a normal BMI standard deviation score range? When we looked at the body composition and other indices, the excess fat was seen in more boys in the younger age group, while in the older age group more females had a higher amount of fat mass. Almost 40% girls in the older age group were having high amounts of body fat, denoting to be obese. Once again, there is discrepancy between the number of children detected to be obese by BMI cutoff and the number of children to be detected by the percentage fat mass. When applied to any other group of 10 to 15 years, the pattern was similar in boys. This slide shows that percentage of individuals having high fat mass that is associated with metabolic derangements in each of the BMI C-score categories according to each birth weight group. Almost all children with a more than +2 standard deviation in the BMI charts has high percentage of fat that is not healthy. In the overweight group, that is standard deviation between +1 to +2, about 3/4 have high amounts of fat. Even in the so-called normal group, this is median to +1, little over a quarter of the group has high amounts of fat. So it appears that even in the so-called normal group, a considerable amount of subjects have a higher percentage of body fat. A similar distribution was seen among boys also. In both girls and boys, the number of children with unhealthy body composition or unhealthy fat content is very low in the groups below the median, thus once again raising the question that whether in the WHO 2007 growth charts or what we use at the moment in the CHDR chart, overweight cutoffs should be median to +1 SD and obesity more than +1 SD. As we saw from the literature, the shortcoming of the currently available anthropometric cutoff was seen in this cohort as well. We looked at commonly available BMI, waist circumference, waist to height ratio for 5 to 10-year-old girls. For BMI cutoff, we tested the common WHO +2 standard deviation, which is used in the CHDR, the IOTF, and then the BMI cutoffs described by us for Sri Lankan children in 2011. Both WHO and IOTF had almost 100% specificity with very low sensitivity. However, the BMI cutoffs we described had high sensitivity and specificity of more than 94%. Similar analysis was done for waist circumference using British 1990 cutoff and waist circumference cutoff described by us for Sri Lankan children in 2011. The British 1990 set gave low sensitivity but high specificity, while Sri Lankan cutoff developed by us showed high sensitivity and specificity of almost 90%. When waist to height ratio were assessed, the conventional cutoff value of 0.5 showed a higher specificity but low sensitivity. However, when the cutoff level was reduced to 0.4, the sensitivity became 100% with low specificity. We have described the waist for height ratio cutoff values of 0.45 to be associated with metabolic derangements, and it shows high sensitivity and specificity of more than 80%. For 5 to 10-year-old boys, also similar distribution was seen, with again the Sri Lankan cutoff described by us gave high sensitivity and specificity for both BMI and waist circumference. A similar pattern was shown in 10 to 15-year-old girls, and a similar pattern also in the same age group boys. So this analysis shows that the cutoff values developed in Sri Lankan setting are more robust and gives good sensitivity and specificity compared to international cutoff values. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I think what is needed to be done is to revise the cutoff values suitable for local setting, and also to look for simple newer methods for screening of an individual with risk. Therefore, best would be to revise the cutoff values to suit the local population and develop newer methods for screening to detect abnormal levels of fat in the body, as it is the main risk factor for the development of metabolic complications later in life. We looked at different anthropometric measures and indices that could have a better predictive value in detecting adverse fat content of the body that would be associated with metabolic derangements. ROC curves were developed for waist circumference, BMI C scores, waist to hip ratios, and waist to height ratios. As you can see that all lines are highly effective in predicting the fat percentage in the body, except for waist to hip ratio, which is shown in the brown color and stands alone in the middle of the chart. A similar distribution is also seen in older age group boys, where again the waist to hip ratio, the brown line, is a poor predictor compared to other indices. In younger age as well as older age groups, a similar pattern of prediction by the anthropometric indices can be seen. You may remember that I showed you these same two charts before also, where different BMI cutoff values for each sex and age were compared. Additionally, the light brown line has been included, which is a newer set of BMI charts developed based on this sample of children to represent a percentage fat mass of 28.6% in boys and 33.7% of fat in the girls. Cutoff values were developed using regression models. The new BMI values derived for 18-year-old Sri Lankan male and female adults are 24.2 kilograms per square meter and 21.5 per kilogram per square meter respectively. In the previous study, the cutoff values given for boys was 19.2 and girls 19.7. A similar value was shown by a study done by Dudeja in India. Although these values appear quite low, similar results have been seen in another Sri Lankan study conducted by Katulend and his co-workers based on cardiovascular risk. Razak and co-workers recommended a BMI cutoff of 21 for South Asian populations living in Canada based on glucose metabolism. The proposed waist circumference cutoff values are quite low for females but closer to the values proposed by IDF for males. The low cutoff values described in our study could be expected by the fact that we looked at a measured fat content of the body, while the other studies have arrived at different cutoff values based on clinical outcomes, which are in fact effects of accumulation of excess fat, and that occurs later in the disease process. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, childhood obesity is on the rise and related metabolic complications begin from a younger age. Health staff be more aware of the problems and need more support staff. Proper nutrition, not in excess, not in less, guided by close growth monitoring and allowing growing along the birth centile would be helpful in controlling NCDs. Development of appropriate screening or diagnostics tools for assessment of childhood nutritional status is important, and new cutoff value should be appropriate for local setting. Therefore, either locally derived screening tool should be used or cutoff values from internationally available chart should be adjusted to suit the local requirement. Therefore, we carers as well as decision makers of health have a greater responsibility in the process of controlling NCDs. Ladies and gentlemen, carrying out a research project of this magnitude is not an easy task, and there had been so many people. Although I may not be able to thank them individually, I would like to thank everybody as a whole. I would like to end my oration placing a quote made by Prof. C.C. De Silva, who could be considered as a pioneer in clinical nutrition in this country. I thank all of you for your patient listening and accepting our invitation to be here. Thank you.